Hi, and you're very welcome to episode 38 of the Women's League of Ireland podcast here on finalwhistle.ie with myself, Breifne Earley, and of course, the ever reliable and enthusiastic and knowledgeable on all things LOI women, Erin Clarke. Erin, another week, another international break. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, another international break. How many have we had this year? This stage, I'm losing count. I think we've had what?
Another week, I think, at this stage. We've been breaking the season.
And we still have another one to come before the end of the year as well. It's thankfully the next one, the league will be finished. Been a bit of a mad couple of weeks with fixtures being called off. We've had storms, we've had everything. It's just been mental, and the international break started coming off the back of teams not playing a game. I know we'll be speaking about the fixtures from the weekend. I think I seen Phil Trill saying that Galway played their first game in like 32 days or something last weekend, and it's been a mad old time with fixtures called off, the weather, summer football, but it's coming into winter now.
Yeah, but I think it's been a very positive year for the game in the country as well. I know we talked about there's been managerial changes in the top job for the Irish national team. There's been the World Cup. There's been players kind of stepping out on the world stage and really making an impact, both here and on the international stage and in the WSL and other places as well. But it's been a kind of a really, really breakthrough year, I think, for the sport, at least, if not maybe for the league just yet. We haven't quite seen that trickle down economics come into the league just yet, but I think we're probably going to see it over the course of the next 12 to 24 months. Thoughts on that?
It's been highly positive. Like, for me, you're looking at highlights, and I think as much as everybody talks about the World Cup, the All Ireland Cup was a real highlight. It worked very well. We've seen two new teams, albeit Athlone was the President Cup. It was the first time it happened, getting their hands on silverware with Athlone and Galway. The sort of domino effect of always being the top teams. Everybody started thought we'd see one team because of the financials dominate the league. We haven't seen that. We've seen the story of the Underdogs this year with P Mounts. Like, there's just been so many different stories written that have been mesmerizing. Like we've talked about, Treaty United and Anne-Marie Uliak in goal, sort of the number of goals conceded compared to last year. We look at it across the board, the amount of youngsters, 15, 16-year-olds making their debuts, things like that. But there's been positives, but there's also been some stuff in terms of you'd like to see better. There's been the likes of the under-17s losing all three games in the recent playoffs. The under-19s got off to a losing start yesterday. Like, there's still worrying times in terms of the development of Irish football. College football is back on now, but the problem is it's hard to find out who's playing where and when unless the colleges actually tweet about it. So there's lots of still.
That's not true anymore. Credit where credit is due. The fixtures, at least, maybe not necessarily the results always, but the fixtures are on the FAI Connect app, which
they only go up on the day. Okay. A lot of time they only go up on the day.
I have seen them a couple of days ahead of time in places, but the FAI Connect, it has its flaws, but it's vastly superior to what has been there in the past. I still believe, I am completely biased, I still believe that we give as good here on Final Whistle, that we give probably as good coverage of the junior game at least as anybody else. But in terms of the fixtures for the women's, I actually was flicking through it the other day, so I have to give them credit where it's due. It could be better, and it could be more urgently updated with results and fixtures rather than just proactively waiting for them to come in. I think that should be something the FAI should look at next in terms of actually having someone whose job it is. Yes, it'll cost them money. Yes, it'll cost them frustration and all of the things that go associated with getting these scores, but it needs to be quicker. In the modern day, we expect it to be instant. Anything less than a couple of minutes to wait for a result, you just get frustrated and you don't come back to the platform. So that's important. But
I'm going to say something here, and you're not going to believe I'm going to say it, because we've had many disagreements in terms of how we think Irish football should go. But I really am coming around to the idea now, after seeing some of the college lineups this week, that college football is the next step we need to take for the intermediary before we can bridge that gap. Because I'm just looking at the amount of players that are going away without education. Some are going with education, and I just think education is probably the best way now, as I've been thinking about this, to keep the players in the league, to have a real scholarship system, to have a real opportunity system. Because you just looked the other day, Billy Cleary's Galway played UCD. You look at some of the players who are playing with UCD, playing with different National League clubs. You look at the Galway team, players playing for a couple of different clubs. It's just vastly spread. And I just think, to me, that's probably finally coming around to the idea that is probably the way forward. That's probably the quickest way forward. It's probably the quickest win to actually help keep players in the league. And I can see your smile because you finally got me to come around to this a little bit. But I'm starting to come around to that. I think college football needs to have a massive part in everything that's good, because funding for college sports is a lot easier to secure.
Well, that's it. These colleges, they have budgets. Now, they don't have National League type budgets, but they have resources. They have expertise within the units. Some of these colleges have really, really good sports science units. They have an ample amount of students begging for the experience. And I know I spent a season at UCD back in the mid-noughties, way before the League of Ireland, the Women's National League thing. And I am showing my age. And I was coaching. I was already retired playing. And so that's even more showing my age. But it was a setup that probably half the teams in the League of Ireland, Women's National League now, and even some of the ones in the Men's National League would have been envious of. Full gym access because the facilities were there on site, full strength and conditioning access, two full-time staff effectively for half an hour or an hour on training nights beforehand to do the kind of the warm-ups and everything in the gym with a proper program, any amount of facilities in terms of pitches, because if it was raining and one was damaged, we'd use a different pitch. We had our base, but we had alternatives. We had Astro alternatives. All of the colleges now have enough facilities to cater for that. The clubs need to be entering in and not just taking those facilities, but actually entering into a proper relationship where everybody wins. The student gets an education and gets the experience and gets the social life experience of being in college. The college get a really competitive team and get the associated glory that comes with that. And the clubs get this development pathway for their players to really grow them from really exciting potential players at under 17 and under 19 into fully fledged National League players. And there's an opportunity there for everybody in the cycle to get a win out of that. And it's something we need to operate on. And I haven't even mentioned, you've talked at length about the under 23 squads. I'm still not convinced on that. I would prefer to see a properly funded and properly resourced World University Games. It's no longer in the World University Games. It's the World kind of Students' Cup. I'm not quite sure the terminology on it. But I would prefer to see a properly resourced program around competing at that. Ireland's always done really well. Noel King took a side to a semi-final, got beaten on penalties by Russia in 2007 in Bangkok. I know they got to a semi-final as well in more recent times. I wasn't involved, so I don't quite know the details, but I know maybe Naples, I think it might have been Naples a couple of years ago, 2019.
Colin Bell.
I can't remember who was the manager. It might have been Colin Bell. And so Ireland have competed reasonably well when they've had the right focus. Otherwise, it's just a waste of money. And I think I'm really excited to see what Eileen Gleeson does when we get a new international manager and Eileen Gleeson gets that side of the role as it currently stands out off her shoulders. I'm really excited to see where she takes the women's football unit, the league, the underage stuff. And I'm disappointed with the underage stuff recently. The defeat yesterday, 2-0 to Belgium, it's not the end of the world, but we used to get through those groups without really batting an eyelid. We topped those first qualifying phases at 17s and 19s. 3 defeats in the 17s last month or earlier this month is not good. And particularly, I think one of them was 6-0 a defeat. And like that's just not good enough anymore. But
the problem is for the listeners, the problem is that the second phase, there's now relegation into the second phase of the playoffs. So even if you finish fourth, it's not like you get a fourth seed in the elite. There's now like relegation and you have to win your group to get back up into the top tier. And like that sort of thing is a concern because we've never really had that where we've struggled to sort of do that. Like you look when we hosted the competition a couple of years ago, when played games in Tala, you think the likes of Abby Larkin playing at that stage, and then you're looking at a lot of players who were involved, even in the 17s. So some of the players in the 17s who were involved, who have National League experience, who've played National League games this year, and you're sort of thinking, okay, you expect them to do quite well when they lose all 3 games. Even that under 19 side, there's a lot of quality in that 19 side, but then to go out and lose 2-0 to Belgium puts them massively on the back foot, because realistically they need to win the next 2 games, otherwise they're going to be in trouble as well. And like, I still disagree with the one thing. I still think the 23s team is needed more than the University Games team, and I'll tell you why. Because a lot more countries are now going with the 23s team. We've now seen Scotland have one as well. So there's more and more countries that are actually having 23s team. If the Universities Games was going to happen properly in terms of the women's soccer, it'd need to be across the board with every country. But I don't see a lot of other countries committing the sort of resources as much as it is great. I think it should go hand in hand.
I just think it's a competitive structure that exists. There's nothing there under 23s at the moment. So,
but my problem with that is there's a Universities Games. There's nothing else. Like you used to see when Greg Elverton was in charge of the men's under colleges team, they played the odd couple of games throughout the year. They play games against different colleges, countries, and things like that. But we never even see that with the women.
That did happen with the women. I was involved with teams that played against Ireland, Northern Ireland, under 19s from the Republic. There was a kind of a reasonably regular fixture list against Scottish universities, against Welsh universities. It did exist. It just maybe mightn't have been on your radar or as high profile.
It hasn't existed in the last 8 to 10 years. That's the problem. That's the problem.
But that's what I'm talking about, is bringing that back. And those teams are out there to play. I remember coaching Leinster sides that would have played against the Irish under 19s and 17s back in the day. Sue Ronan at the time would have wanted games. You would have no problem filling those kind of fixtures or completing a fixture list like that. But it's part of a structured program, not just let's throw a little bit of money at it and tick a box. That can't work.
The other problem with the likes of the 19s now at the minute is the 19s home-based sides play against the likes of National League teams and pre-season friendlies, and they're now playing against National League teams and stuff like that. Whereas that's what they've now committed to doing them sort of things. And to me, to be honest with you, there's an awful lot of things that need to change in and around the whole structures of Irish football, need improvement. And now is the time to sort of reevaluate everything and see what's good, what's not good, what can we improve, what can we develop, what can we grow on, who can we take structures off England, can we look at things that America do well, can we look at things that say Sweden do well, countries like that. Now's the time where we have that opportunity to, off the back of the World Cup, to say, okay, what worked well, what didn't work well, let's go and improve it. Because the one concern you would still have is that we're going to say status quo, everything's going to be focused around the women's senior team. The rest is sort of a trickle down. If they get a little bit of extra help, it's the bare minimum. Where it's the same with them. A lot of it, unfortunately, it's the same to men as well. Where a lot of it is based around the senior men's team. The League of Ireland sort of takes a back step to everything. And to me, you can't have that with women's football, especially in Ireland, because if you do, we're going to turn around in a couple of years' time and have a women's Premier Division where it's the exact same as the men's Premier Division. The gap between that and when players go abroad or play senior football, they're going to weaker and weaker teams, and it gets even harder. Whereas I think women's football is even more important that we have as much of a trajectory to where the way the internationals go.
I completely agree with you, and nobody's as critical as the FAI as I have been at times in the past. But I think, to be fair, Eileen Gleeson's in the job a wet week. She's been distracted by the situation that's been outside her control within the women's national team, that she stepped into that breach for the last few months. She's done a really, really good job.
Forget what she's doing.
In the new year.
I'm gonna go in slightly further. The problem when Eileen Gleeson came into that job as well is Eileen came into that job in February. It was full blaze towards the World Cup. So there was never going to be really anything done from when Eileen came into that. Forget having to take the senior job for a couple of months. Even before that, there was never going to be much change because of the fact that the World Cup was on the horizon. The one thing I will credit the FAI with making a change this year is, and we've seen it in conjunction with Fingal County Council, is that transition year course. Like, there's players like Hannah Healy on that course. I think young Freya Healy as well. 2 players, one for Peamount, one for Shelbourne. I think there's others as well, but I just haven't got a full list that are playing in National League squads who are going to benefit from having a full year of playing football while actually mixing the classroom as well. And I think that sort of thing is a massive step in the right direction to go on equal par with the boys. And like, that's a step in the right direction. Let's hope, as you say, when Eileen goes back to that job after the Northern Ireland game, she, along with Mark Cannon and Jonathan Hill and the other high ups in the FAI, can have a good look at women's football, where we need, what we're lacking. The problem is everything is going to come down to, a lot of it's going to come down to investment. But then again, things that require investment, is there other ways we can do it? Is there strategic ways we can do it? Can we look at how we can how we can entice more sponsors, how we can entice, because you look at the women's team have a lot more sponsors come on board than the men have gotten in recent years. You know, with some high profile sponsors with the likes of Cadbury's, Sky. Like the women's brand is there to be invested in. I think it did take a bit of a hit with the Vera Pauw situation, but I think with the fact of how they've started the Nations League, they've sort of recovered that, and they've started being able to just move on a bit and then put that into the past.
We'll talk about the Women's International tomorrow night in a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes. But first of all, we better not forget that there actually is a bit of football to be played as well. 3 games played in the league last weekend. None of them really ones that we'll be talking about for much longer than what the next 10 or 15 minutes. But there's very little jeopardy left in anything really in the league. The players are playing for pride and placings at this moment in time. The Peas have the league wrapped up. I suppose that was confirmed. They would have won on a head-to-head or on a kind of better results against Shamrock Rovers on the basis of Rovers catching them. That can't even happen anymore. They've won it officially by points and everything now. 2 games left to go, 3 for Shamrock Rovers. They can't catch Peamount even with that because of that 1-1 draw in Ferrycarrig Park at the weekend. Your thoughts on the results of the games last weekend? Let's start maybe down in Ferrycarrig Park. Wexford very unlucky not to hold on and win all 3 points. It was an early goal from Kylie Murphy, well worked, good pull back from Emily Corbett. Murphy got it past the keeper and put them 1 up in the first half, and then it was a very, very late OG from Lauren Dwyer, and she was very disappointed. I saw her on Twitter talking about how it was her first goal in 5 years and it was in the wrong net. But I think Wexford, Rovers were probably the better side throughout the 90 minutes, to be fair, but Wexford, that would have been a big result for them as they go into an uncertain season ender in terms of changing their brand and their identity to become fully part of the Wexford FC project down there.
I think apart from Peamount, Wexford have probably been one of the stronger teams since the international break. They've managed to pick up a lot of points. There's no coincidence that with Alan Malloy coming back as well, it's added a bit of extra spark in and around the team. And when they take the lead, you're sort of thinking, okay, it's one of them games. Rovers coming in off the back of the cup defeat, the Shells, they would be hurting. Did they really want second place? Did they really want how much did the second place in the league really matter to them? And then with a little bit of good fortune at the end, I felt for Lauren. Lauren's someone who's had horrific injuries in the last number of years, and to see her back playing regular as well is probably one of the highlights for me of this season. And when she puts into her own net, you got to feel for her. But as you say, Shamrock Rovers probably the better team over the 90 minutes, and if they come away with nothing, they're probably extremely disappointed. From a Rovers viewpoint, though, the point, it is enough for the fact that if they win their game in hand against DLR Waves and win their last games, they can still finish second place ahead of Shells by a point. So for them, realistically, while they would have wanted the 3, it's probably not the perfect bounce back result, but not coming away with empty handed, I think was important for Collie O'Neill's side. Like, they've had a good season. You can't say they haven't had a good season, considering you put a fresh 18, 19 players together, and it's hard to expect them to go and win a league the first time asking, as much as people like us probably put pressure on them to say with the investment that they should be winning the league. But if they can win the last 3 games and finish second, I think it's a really good season, and it's a good building block.
Question for you regarding that, because I'm split on that, whether it's a good season or not good season based on the results. I think they would have expected slightly better privately. They might not have said that publicly, but I think privately, I think the people maybe who've no experience of the women's game, who might have been part of that decision from the men's side of the club, may have just thought, well, if we put in a big budget there, we win the league, end of story, game over. And that hasn't materialized for them. They haven't even made the cup final, which will be a big disappointment as well, especially considering it's going to be in Tala. In terms of the overall picture in the club, we've seen a lot of whispers now on the men's side about Stephen Bradley's contract and budgets for next year. And is that likely to affect the women's side of the club? I'm hearing
it potentially is going to affect the women's side of the club. I'm hearing we may see a downgrade in budget slightly. But the other problem is Breifne, they went from having nobody on professional contracts to a lot of players on decent money as well. Like, it was a big investment, whereas you've seen the likes of Bows in recent years, they've sort of gradually increased things slightly to where they've come up a little bit more and a little bit more. Whereas I think from a Rovers viewpoint, the way they went in full steam ahead with the money that we're hearing that was thrown around for certain players, like, was it the case that they felt they had to pay over the odds to get players in, to get players to sign for them? Potentially. Was it a wise move? Probably not. You would have liked to have seen, okay, get a couple of players on professional contracts. The problem is once they got the likes of the Anya O'Gorman and Steph Roach, some of the other players just go because the money was too good not to take? Whereas, would you have got some of them players if you maybe weren't offering, you were just offering expenses instead of offering decent contracts? You probably would have got some of them. But I just think it was a case that they said, okay, we need to make a splash here. We need to make a massive hurrah. And I think the one thing comment that sort of come back to bite them is the comment about raising the standard of the league. That's been, because we've seen Sheld fans, we've seen Peamount fans sort of jump all over that comment from an interview at the start of the year because of the fact that they're all saying, while they're saying they're raising the standards, they're just throwing money in at it and expecting results. Whereas the problem is there's games like the Bows game away, you don't expect them to drop points in it. They should have lost to Peamount in PRL Park. There's other games where they've got lucky a little bit as well. Like, when you reflect on it, like, for a new team, if they finish second, on paper you have to say it's a good result. But I 100% agree with you. Certain people in the background will be asking questions. Is it really a good result? But the other side of it, from the likes of ourselves looking in, is while we would have experience and know Collie O'Neill, it's Collie's first year in women's football as well. So you look at the management team, not many of them in the women's would have experience within the women's game as well, which is a completely different environment to come into. So I think while others in the background probably had a bit of an unrealistic expectation that they were going to win the league, I think if they'd have won the league, it would have been a miracle for me. That's being honest, even with the players they signed.
A question for you. Obviously, the impact of having a shorter season, 2 rounds of games rather than 3 rounds of games, is an impact as well. They went from having maybe 27 games to only having 20 to try and win that league title. If they had those extra 7 or 10 games, as it might be in an 11-team league, do you think realistically they might have been competitive at the end with another crack at Peamount and Shelburne later on down, or would it be looking just maybe at an extension of more or less the same?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, because the problem is, and this is going back to Peamount United, is could you see Peamount United over a longer season dropping a lot more points? That's the other question. I'm not convinced, because realistically they should have beaten Shamrock Rovers when they played in PRL Park. The loss to Shelburne was 10-15 minutes of madness, where they conceded 4 goals in that period and went from being 1-0 up to 4-1 down. Like, other than that, they've looked comfortable in nearly majority of the games. So, like, I would say realistically, if there was another round of games, I would fancy Peamount to pick up at least another 8 wins out of that, maybe 9 wins out of that, and still be out countering out in front. Whereas, do I think Rovers will be better over a longer season? Yes, I do think they'll be better, but I'd still say that I'd still fancy Peamount to get this equivalent amount of points per game over the longer season.
In terms of Wexford, obviously you mentioned Ellen Malloy back, huge addition to the team. We've seen players of her quality move on from the league. She may have gone had the injury not happened. She's in education, so maybe that's a factor in her decision as well. Can we expect to see a player of Malloy's class in the league in, say, this time next year?
It's difficult. The problem is, as you say, with the education. Does Ellen want it? Like, a lot of people now realize the importance of education. Like, if Ellen Malloy was to do a college course and then go, would it hamper? Probably not, because I think realistically she could still go. Like, and we talked about Amber Barrett multiple times. Amber Barrett is a prime example. Even players like Louise Quinn went away with college stuff in the background. Megan Campbell went to America, albeit to play with Florida State, but she was in college in Carlow first. Like, players are now realizing as well that they're not going to make a living when they retire off football. So I think education is as important. Like, I know some players, when they go abroad, do college courses as well. I think it's more in tune just to what they want to do. The only problem from Ellen is, I think before Ellen makes any decision, Ellen will just want to play regularly. Ellen won't want to stay injury free, because coming back from that ACL there's always a massive risk. But I think with Wexford youth, with the players around, that she's got a lot of players that would have helped her through. Obviously, like Rihanna done it multiple times. Kira Rossler's done it twice. Adele Kennedy, players who've done the ACL would be able to sort of mentor and marshal. I don't think Ellen will be in a rush. Do I think Ellen will eventually go? Yes, I do think she will eventually go. When, I'm not sure. It all depends if she wants to stay with the education or she is looking at going straight away. But from what I can see with Ellen is quite grounded.
Yeah. She seems to be a fairly clued in kind of young one. In terms of the other games last weekend, Athlone made the trip down to Bishopstown. I suppose been a tough week for everybody in Cork, not just in a football context, but in a survival context. Some very, very tough news coming out of places, particularly like some Middleton, seem to be very hardly hit with the floods across the county last week. The game did go ahead, but moved out to Bishopstown. We've talked about that situation with playing in Bishopstown. We're not going to get into it again today. We don't have the time. But in terms of the game on the field,
I was surprised it was played. I'm not going to lie. I thought when we were looking what was happening in Cork in the last week, I was like, "There's no hope it gets played." But like the fact that they actually got to play, I think is a positive from a Cork City viewpoint. Obviously, being 3-0 down and then scoring a consolation goal late on. It's just another sign of when they step up against the slightly better opposition, they're struggling. They don't seem to be able to sort of match the teams. And like once Athlone score early, you're sort of thinking it's going to be Athlone cruise control. It was a nice first goal from Dana Sheriff, and then Chloe gets the second, and then Dana adds a third, and like comfortable enough win for Athlone in the end, and not really surprising. I think the only thing from an Athlone viewpoint is the fact they conceded the late goal. That'll be the thing that disappoints them. But then the Sheriff moving up to the top of the scoring charts as well. I'd be interested, and we'll have a look at it in a bit to look at her goals per minute. Like it's been impressive enough. She's been impressive enough this season with that. And I think my Cork viewpoint, it's just going to be see out the last couple of games and try and focus and rebuild for next year.
Well, thankfully, she very conveniently went to 10 goals at the weekend. So it's 83.7 minutes. I can do that one in my head. That's not the most difficult of divisions. And so it's more than a goal per 90 minutes, which is impressive. Probably that's what we would have seen in the league in the early days. And with all due respect to the likes of Anya and Stephanie, who you mentioned earlier, they would have been hitting like a goal a game. But they were playing against some very weak opposition in those years who just weren't able to compete.
Can I ask you a question then?
Go on.
Are you surprised to see after 17, 18 games, the top scorers 10 goals this year?
No, I think
I am.
You think it should be higher or lower?
I thought it would have been about 14 or 15 at least.
But I think that stemmed from the fact that the teams at the lower end are no longer the cakewalk that they used to be. Like, I think we did an analysis earlier in the year about last year's top scorer, which I think was Emily Corbett off the top of my head. And most of her goals came against teams in the bottom half of the league. Now, there's still goals that still count. But in the crunch games against the top sides, goals are harder to come by across the board for strikers. And even, I think I saw a ridiculous thing on social media during the week about Harry Kane, where somebody made the argument that he's scored 0 important goals for England because they've all come in friendlies and against teams like San Marino and that sort of thing, that he hasn't scored in a crunch game against anyone in the top 10 at a World Cup finals. Now, they went completely OTT, but the point of it is that those kind of gimmies, like even when I was younger, we've talked about how old I am already, thanks very much for that. But when I was younger going to games, like my first international game was a 5-0 victory for Ireland over Turkey. That would never happen today. We'd be lucky to get away with a 5-0 defeat on some days against Turkey. So there are times out there when you kind of think you don't have the gimmies, like the 7, 8, 9-0s against the likes of Andorra and San Marino and Gibraltar. They just don't exist anymore in the international game. And the same applies at local level. Treaty aren't a pushover anymore. Like they got beat 3-1. We'll talk about that in a minute at the weekend. 3-0, sorry, at the weekend. But they were very unlucky. They were, again, beaten by the better side, but with a bit of luck, could have got a point out of that game very, very easily. We're seeing teams harder to score against this year. And even now, looking at the league table here in front of me, the goals conceded by the teams at the bottom half of the table, it's just over 2.5 goals a game. There are seasons where that might have been 5 or 6 goals a game. And I think that's playing into it. If you look at the men's league, it's less than 50% games goals per game, if that makes sense. It's about 36 games. If someone hits 20, it's a phenomenal season in the League of Ireland. I think that's about right. So yeah, really long answer to a very short question. In terms of, but I think it's the goalkeeper, since the defense is getting better at the lower end of the table, is reducing that down, and I think we're looking at quality of Dana Sharif, and or Sheriff. We've seen her come up with some absolute screamers. The first goal the other day was fabulous to put them on the way, and I think there's potential there for us to see. Like Anya Gorman's had a good season and only got 9 goals in 16 starts, so that'll show you kind of how that works. 10 years ago, that'll be 20, 21, 22 in 17 games. The opportunities just aren't there anymore.
I like it though. I do like it, but I maybe it's just I expected a little bit more. My rationale or realistics were a little bit too high. But like to be honest with you, I used to hate going to certain games where a top team's going to play a weak team. You're 7-8 nils. And then you're looking at like this season, for example, Treaty United against Shelbourne in Talca Park, 1-0. If Treaty take the chance they have, they might score. They score in the game, they could get something out of that game. And I think that's probably the major big difference, is that I think these smaller teams no longer have that massive fear factor. Well, some players probably still have a bit of a fear factor. In general, they don't have that massive fear factor that they used to have when they go out. Oh, we're playing against Noel Murray, we're playing against Pearl Slattery, we're playing against these big names. It's difficult. Whereas now, I think the younger kids don't care who they're playing against. The younger kids just come out and say it's just another game of football, and because they've been used to playing highly competitive games from a younger age, and I think it all stems back to the growth from the underage leagues.
Oh, 100%. And I think as well as that, the other side of it is we know these players because of what we've watched them do over the last decade or so. With all due respect, these youngsters are coming into the league probably with only a year or two's knowledge of these girls, and they're putting in a 10-goal season rather than a 20-goal season. So that fear maybe isn't as high based on the reality of how these players have progressed through their...
I seen a great picture last Thursday on social media, the day after Shells beat Sligo, and it was Leah Riley, who played fullback for Shelbourne. Her mother put a picture up on social media, and it's Leah from a couple of years ago standing on the sideline watching the players to now being on the pitch. And I just thought it's poignant because like we can look back and think, I remember watching Union make a debut. Prime example, I remember watching Heather Payne making her P-Mount debut. As players I've been lucky enough to be there when they've made debuts at National League. Have now gone on to play at high level, play for Ireland and stuff like that. I mean, when we look back at now the next generation, there's going to be more and more of them that we're going to say, yeah, we were there when you made your debut, or we seen you score your first goal. I think it's cool. I think it's the one thing that I love about the league is the fact that there's so many untold stories or untold things that we never thought we'd see that tend to come to fruition.
Yeah, it's even better when you have the person who gave them their debut at certain standards. That's quite a nice little ring to it as well. I've actually just, while you've been chatting there, I've been working away in the background here to actually work on that stat you asked for, goals per 90 minutes. Now, there will be a little bit of rubbish at the top where players come on, scored in about 3 minutes of an appearance. So ignore the first couple. But I've made a quick little change here on the website just to reflect that. So if I bring it in here quickly,
while we're looking at this, I have another one that I think we need to get to the bottom of it, and I think I know the answer. You probably see me tweet the other day. I think Niamh Burke's now the most successful Women's League of Ireland player of all time, if I'm not mistaken, with 6 titles.
Yeah, I don't know if that's accurate, but it sounds about accurate. There can't be.
Because I think the likes of Noel. I think Noel has 5. Like it's something I was looking to, but you look at these like the likes of.
Yeah. So you can ignore a lot of the. No offense to the early girls, but they've less than 2 games really played in terms of minutes on the pitch. But Danish Sheriff here, 10 goals in 837 minutes is fairly impressive. Others who've played in a few games, like Lauren Kelly, okay, she's come on as a sub 12 times, average of about 10 minutes. She's got 2 goals.
Kate Mooney's is impressive.
Yeah. Absolutely, but you work your way down through Gemma Quinn again. We haven't seen a whole pile of Gemma on the field, but scoring 2 goals in every 3 games. Basically, Gillian Keenan, something similar, 3 goals in 5 games. Christy Gray. I was surprised by how little time Christy Gray's actually played. I wasn't, and because I've watched a lot of Shelbourne.
But like the last couple of weeks, you've just seen how important she's been to Shells. And I'm shocked that she hasn't played more, but I knew she hadn't played as much. And like for me, like we've talked at length about Shells, players coming in from abroad. For me, her and Maggie Pearce have been the two players that have come in that have been superb for them. If you look at the foreign signs in the last couple of years.
Can I add Morgan Reese to that list as well? I think she's been really impressive in the last few weeks.
Yeah, but Morgan's only really come in since the summer break, so she hasn't played an awful lot of games. She's someone who I'd like to see if Shells can hang on to them three for next year. I think they'd definitely be a good way to add to the spine of the team, especially if you got the likes of the young Hannah Healy, Rebecca Devereaux, Leah Riley. There's even Kate McCarran. There's some smashing young talents in that Shelbourne team. I think as much as the older guard won't like me saying this, but I think the reliance on the older guard will eventually phase out at Shelbourne to where these next younger generation, because you look at that under 17s team from Shelbourne, I think they're unbeaten in, I think it was 20 or 30 odd games stemming back even the last season, so like there's no doubt they've got young talent there, but it's about all these youngsters making that next step up. But the goals per minute when you look at some of the players, it's actually quite impressive.
Yeah, no, I'll probably just take that off the site, but we will maybe do an article around some of the impressive stuff there. Even the likes of, as I move down to the list, Madison Gibson, 0.43 goals per 90 minutes. Chloe Singleton, 0.42. Jenna Slattery's in that same ballpark. Hannah Healy's in there. Limited time, just over 200 minutes on the field, but she has found the back of the net. And there's some really impressive results in there in terms of how many players are around that, maybe 2 goals every 5 games mark. And I mean, when I say games, I mean by 90 minutes fully played on the field. There's a lot of kind of impressive performances there from a lot of players. So plenty to talk about. The final game, of course, of the weekend was that game, Treaty United and Galway United, battle of the Western Seaboard. Galway made the journey down to Limerick. Well, some of the Galway girls made the journey down to Limerick. A lot of them are already based fairly locally to Limerick anyway. They're well familiar with the Markets Field. They played there for long enough. Kate Thompson with an early goal. Ball kind of fell out of the box to the edge. She was very composed, took her time, one touch, got it out from under her feet, picked it kind of just over Uliak and just under the crossbar. And the second one was almost a carbon copy. Jodie Griffin, her first goal in the WNL in senior football. She'll be delighted with that. But almost a carbon copy. Very little anybody could do from a Trinity point of view with just 2 really top-class finishes. The end of it, though, the last goal, very little again that I suppose Uliak could do to stop Galway. It was just I suppose defensively they'll be disappointed with how that one happened, probably more so than the others. It was a header at the back post, literally the last touch of the game to wrap up the game. And from Jamie Erickson's point of view, she'd be delighted to have got that.
I think you have to give Galway a lot of credit. I just had a look there. September the 9th is the last time they played. Like, that's a long time to go without a game and to win 3-0 and to sort of, to sort of do that. I think it's impressive. And like, it's the one thing we talk about, the stop-start nature of the league. When you look at stats like that, Bows don't play for 4 weeks as well from their last game up until the Shells game next week. Like, that's the only one major downside of the league, being with an odd number of teams. Hopefully we see next year with an additional team coming in, hopefully we see an additional team coming in to even that number up. But there's one team I don't think it will be, and by the looks of things, I don't think we'll see a Dundalk team coming in anytime soon with the stuff we're hearing with the men's budgets and stuff like that being cut. So like, that was one we were hoping to see maybe in the next year. Maybe we might see the likes of a Drogheda United or a Cove Ramblers sort of applying to come in. But I do think from a National League viewpoint, we need to have an even number of teams. Otherwise, I think this with the international breaks and the way things work, I think the odd number of teams is just extremely frustrating.
It's funny you say that because Drogheda United, head of women's football, is also today. She's also in the news today, and she's involved in something we were going to chat about at the end of the show, but we might as well talk about it now when it's here. Getting her first taste against League of Ireland opposition in that role as head of women's football in Drogheda United. She's part of the coaching staff, or the management staff, for want of a better word, for the Underdogs, and it's taken on a soccer context this year for the first time. And it's going to be a group of ragtag ladies who've been around the game, but maybe not at National League level in recent times, coming together to try and take on I think it's going to be Galway United based on some of the promos that I saw being shot after the Avenir Cup final. It looked to be a kind of a face-off.
They've been going for quite a long time. I know they've played Cork City in a friendly. I know they've played a couple of.
Spoiler alert! If someone actually wants to watch the series, it starts tonight.
The only reason I know they played Cork City in a friendly is because someone from Cork actually said it to me that they played it in and around just before the Town Euro Cup game. So other than that, I wouldn't have actually known. I don't know the ins and outs. I'm intrigued to see how it's going to work. I was wondering to what team they would play in the end. Like, realistically, could you imagine that a game if it is potentially a Galway and it's a name of DC Park or something? Like, I was wondering what they do, maybe a National League 11 players who've never played together in team. You know,
that's what the WNL. That's what the Underdogs team is. You know.
No, what I'm talking about who they'd play against if they play against a National League 11. So like the team of the year, for example. But like you look at, I think the criteria was you cannot have been capped at senior level. You have to have not been in the National League in the last 3 years. Like, we've seen a couple of players who've sort of names who've been snippets on social media. I think Stephanie Bowden is one of them. Barbara O'Connell's the other one who the face that we're seeing plastered all over the place. For anybody who's listening, Barbara O'Connell is the mother of Cork City duo Alex Mendez and Jessie Mendez. So Barbara would have played in the National League years ago. Yeah. It's amazing to think both of us would have got to see both of our kids play and her play in the National League. And, you know, to see it being a full circle, I think it's going to be intriguing. The next couple of weeks, I've seen from some of the promo shots that they released on social media, they've done a lot of training out in Peamount as well. Be interesting to see what the dynamic is. Maeve de Burka obviously involved as well, former Ireland international and Galway WFC star. So I'm excited to see what they do, how they go about it, what sort of vibe it is.
I'm really looking forward to watching it, if I'm quite honest with you. It goes out tonight, as we said, TG Carr. I think it's 9:00. Is it start
9:30?
Yeah. But it well worth watching. Of course, Maeve de Burke has been on this show many times with us as a co-host prior to your arrival in the role, Aaron. But I know I looked through the promo stuff to kind of see if I recognized any of the faces. Of course, I've worked with Stephanie in the past. I would have coached teams against Barbara. She was the bane of my life for a couple of seasons when she was at Colossus Stefan Nefa back in the day. But it's been an interesting time. Leah McGrath is one that stands out to me. She's a player who was underage with Sligo Rovers in their first year under 17. She would have been in the same side as Roisin Malloy at that time, and obviously fell out because she was too old. They didn't have a team for her to go to at the time. Playing with Con Rangers recently in the Mayo League, and she's a player who I would have thought would have been definitely good enough to step up to National League level, and I think she will make an impact, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see her. I know she's in University in Dublin at the moment, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see her and others like her being drafted into the Women's League of Ireland next season, because I think we're going to see some absolute classic players in that thing, and it's going to be.
I can't. But I said it. You've probably seen me tweeted this off the WNL show account last night. I can't believe no club has taken a gamble on Ciara Smith in recent years. Probably one of the best junior footballers in the country, and like players like that. Like a lot of them some of them have points to prove. I think that's what makes it spicy. I just want to get your opinion though on the fact that TG Carr committing to a series of women's football. We've seen ladies football. We've seen hurling, we've seen Gaelic football. How big is it though for TG Carr to actually turn around and say, you know what, we're going to do a series on women's football?
I don't think in the modern day, with the World Cup and the attention that the women's football national team got, I don't think it's a difficult sell. I think
not that it's difficult, but how important is it?
Oh, it's massive. Because I would have been at the first final, and I think they played in the Fianna or a Dublin selection back in the day in a Gaelic version of this, probably 15 years ago. I can't remember exactly, but I was in college at the time, and they played in Parnell Park. It was an awful night weather-wise, but it was a great atmosphere. And to watch the lads who probably felt their days of being at that level were behind them get that opportunity. And as far as I can remember, it was really tight. I think the Underdogs might have won that game.
No, I don't think they did. I remember the game. I think I was at it myself. I think I was actually at it myself.
Yeah, but it was awesome. We did meet many moons ago. I love it. But in terms of the I think it's a great series, and it's got that kind of as a TV spectacle, it's great because it's like I don't want to cast aspersions on the players because individually they've all done their own thing, but they're
just an FYI, it was actually 2018 when the Underdogs first started.
No, there was an Underdogs TG. That can't be right.
We'll figure it out. We'll chat about it. But I think it's great.
Series.
I do think it's great.
Yeah, it's maybe a revived series, but there was definitely 2006 was the original one. They ran a 3-season one, 06 to 08. So they did have a fairly big profile back then and went out of operation for about 10 years, but they were back.
But I think this sort of stuff, like I think that just for me it epitomizes what TG Carr's culture is when it comes to women's football. Like you look at the amount of games they've covered this year, the fact that they're adding spicing in a bit of underdogs as well. Interesting. I seen a comment on social media the other day. There's been one League of Ireland club who has never featured on TG Carr since they've started showing live games. Do you know who it is?
Wow. Never featured.
Yeah.
It's got to be a first division team, and it's not
in the League of Ireland, Women's League of Ireland.
Oh, the Women's League of Ireland. Sorry.
One team.
Well, who have I seen? I've seen Peamount, I've seen Wexford, I've seen Shell, I've seen Sligo. You're probably going to tell me it's Galway or something, but that's not right. I don't know, maybe DLR.
Nope, DLR played Galway on it recently. The only team that won't feature or hasn't featured yet is Cork City. And coincidentally, Cork City had no one at the launch last year. So people are putting 2 and 2 together because Treaty United are playing against Treaty United's next home game is actually going to be against Shamrock Rovers is going to be live on TG Carr. So that'll be the only one not to be featured in Cork City.
Well, like there is an element of you scratch our back, we scratch yours. If you don't play ball, it's very easy to get left out. Not saying that's what's happened, but I can understand why. If you've got a coin toss between 2 games, you will go with the people who you find easiest to work with. And I'm not saying the Cork are difficult to work with because in my experience that hasn't been the case at all. But if they don't show up for a press conference, that stuff tends to stick around, unfortunately, for teams involved.
I think from a Treaty viewpoint, though, I don't think Treaty's game would have been shown live if Peamount hadn't have beaten Wexford, because I'd say if that was the case, that Peamount still had to win the league, I'd say they'd have shown Galway against Peamount on the same day. Yeah,
I would imagine so. And that we all know how that works out when Galway play Peamount on the last day of the season. It doesn't work out with Peamount.
Second last day, but that was don't forget, it's been in PRL. I've always said this about Galway. They always have a better chance of getting a result against Peamount in PRL Park. When it comes to Eamon DC Park, they never seem to get a result against them.
Well, home advantage is not an advantage all of the time. Let's talk finally, I suppose, before we wrap up about the there are some fixtures in the middle of next week. The 2 games that weren't played because of the weather a couple of weeks back, they will be played next Wednesday evening. Of course, we've got internationals. We've finished with that, but in terms of next Wednesday night, we see Athlone Town travel to Galway for a reasonably local derby there, as Athlone will travel down the M6 to Galway and take them on. Again, most of those girls know each other from colleges, and they've both been around a lot of them have been around both clubs in recent years. And the Dublin derby, DLR Waves and Shamrock Rovers, they'll do battle as well, as both those sides look to get some points on the board. We won't really talk about that because we might chat about it on another show before then, but let's talk about tomorrow night. Tallaght Stadium sold out in no time at all.
It's sold out.
Oh, tell me more.
I'm still seeing flickers of tickets appear on Ticketmaster as early as today. There was a couple of tickets on Ticketmaster. And the problem for me, Breifne, is we're really going to see the commitment to the Ireland women's team tomorrow, because the fact that game is a 5:45 kickoff will really test how much people are committed to whether they want to go or whether they want to come. Like if I go on to Ticketmaster right now, for example,
there are tickets available. Yeah,
there's tickets in at least 7 different blocks available. There may only be a number of tickets in each block available, but for me, like I've seen there was 100 or something the other day. There's been different ones that have popped up. Like the 5:45 kickoff is tough. It's a difficult sell because of the fact that you've also got Shamrock, you've also got a full round of League of Ireland games on straight after. So anybody who may have gone to see Ireland, who are a League of Ireland fan, they won't go because of the fact if they were going to go to a League of Ireland game. But then you've also got a League of Ireland game on television at 7:45 where Shamrock Rovers can potentially win the league. So for me, it'll be interesting to see what the numbers are, what the uptake is. I do expect to see empty seats. I hate to say that. I do expect to see empty seats. I think if they get more than, say, 7,300 at the game, that's giving them a buffer of about 700 tickets. I think that'll be good. I'd like to see every ticket used, but that's us sort of being optimistic. And I think off the back of a good start to the Nations League, I think the Albania game is probably a game where Ireland fans might see goals. I would expect Ireland to probably score at least 5 or 6 goals in this game. And I don't think she will. I think we might see. I think we'll see Sinead Farrelly come back into the team. The one thing I'm going to say, and I said this on social media as well, all the conspiracy theories about Sinead Farrelly, they're gone. The people questioned whether she was committed or whether was it an injury or was it the because of the incident that happened at the World Cup. Sinead has proven that. Sinead has made herself available after the back issue, and she is in the Ireland camp. She is training with Ireland today, and she's full ready to go. Megan Campbell also coming back in as well.
Yeah, that's a strange one for me because I think the fact that she's played 3 minutes, tail end of a game the other day, maybe 2 weeks ago for Everton, and that's all she's played really in about 6 months since some of the earlier internationals in the season.
It's a bit of a, how would you say, it's a bit of a contradictory towards Marissa Shiva to say Shiva's not in the squad because Shiva's not playing enough, and then to bring Megan Campbell in after Megan playing limited minutes. You have to remember, the last time Megan would have played more than half a game of football, it's probably the start of the year, probably.
But to be fair, and I'm a fan of Marissa Shiva, I think she adds something to the side that we need, and I'd like to see her in the squad. But I think the reality is she hasn't even come off the bench for her side, Washington Spirit, in the last month since the last international break. She hasn't kicked a competitive ball for a single minute, and that's with no obvious injury. Whereas Megan Campbell is coming back from injury, it's not quite the same situation.
But isn't it Campbell?
I do see the contradictory element to it. Yeah.
Is it a gamble to bring Campbell in? It's the same thing. We had the conversation. And you asked me, should Ellen Malloy be in the squad? And I turned around to you and said, no, I don't want to see Ellen Malloy near the squad yet. I want to see Ellen take the time to actually get fit and get back playing regularly, and then bring her back in when she's 100% ready. I just think bringing Megan Campbell back in, are you going to increase the load on her? Are you going to, realistically, if you want to have Megan Campbell in, that's fine. Megan Campbell should not be playing either of these 2 games. If you want to bring her off the bench for 10, 15 minutes for one of the games, fine. But you cannot start Megan Campbell in either of these games and put undue load under her, considering she only signed for Everton days before the opening day of the season. So she hasn't actually put in a full preseason with Everton. Yes, she's been doing alternative training, and we've seen it on social media, but she hasn't been doing full football training for weeks upon weeks and had a full preseason. I only fear that if they do put her in for 45, 50 minutes, she gets injured and then she's gone again. And then it's no benefit to anybody.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. But I think Everton will be having an input in that as well in terms of how much she's used in this international window. I don't see the point in risking her. I think it's not a bad idea to have her in the squad to see how she's getting on firsthand for the coach that's there, just to see if she still has what it takes to play at this level. I believe she will have, but it's a bit of a strange one. I would rather have seen other players in the squad that have played a little bit more game time recently. But I think Megan, listen, she's a battler. She's been there. She's done it. She's won everything that there is to win in the game. And she's been at some of the biggest clubs, biggest universities in the country, in the world. I think she'll be all right when push comes to shove. Will she play a full 90 minutes week in, week out for Everton this season? Probably not. Have we seen the best days of her in an Ireland jersey? Possibly. But I wouldn't rule out her being involved in future Ireland successes.
Yeah. And obviously a change in the goalkeeping structure as well.
Well, I'd like to see a different goalkeeper get an opportunity. And it's not that Courtney Brosnan's done anything that deserves taking looks at. But we need to be better prepared in that respect. And I think either a change in half time, if we're 3 or 4-0 up, stick in a different goalkeeper. They're not going to have to do a whole pile if that is the situation, but it's just being comfortable with the players around you and the circumstances and a big crowd and being on the pitch. It's very different to sitting on the bench. And I just think I'd like to see either of the two reserve keepers get an opportunity. Ideally, 45 minutes each in the second half of both games would be my preferred outcome for the next 2 days or the next 2 games. But
remember, February 2022. It's the last time a different goalkeeper played in goal for Ireland.
Yeah, it's too long in the environment that's there, and I think if you don't trust your keepers, then look elsewhere. There are players who are eligible who maybe you might have more faith in, but at the moment that is who is in possession of the 3 goalkeeping jerseys in the squad, and I think they need to be given a little bit of confidence and given it, because it must be demoralizing coming in for squad after squad after squad and knowing that there's no chance of you seeing the pitch. That's got to be tough to take.
Oh, 100%. There has to be. And like there's other players, outfield players who've come into squads and probably haven't kicked the ball for Ireland as well in a number of period as well. Like if results go our way, so for example, because we're playing Albania in a double header, for example, if the North draw against Hungary in their first game against Hungary and Ireland beat Albania, realistically then Ireland are on the verge of topping the group. If she decides then she's going to go with a full-strength team against Albania just to potentially top the group, the last 2 games, then you're looking at experiment. That's when you're looking at your experiment. If you've already topped the group with 4 games played, then you look at potentially experimenting in both them games. But I do agree with you. I would like to see her try things like a new goalkeeper, try out some players, because the one problem with Ireland over the last period has been it kind of falls back under Vera as well. 90% or 85% of the time, probably you can tell which players are going to come on each game, and it's been the same sort of substitutes used and things like that. Whereas it's pretty much same 16, 17 players maximum that are getting game time.
Yeah. 100%. I think probably 4 or 5 of the girls going to the World Cup, you could have put money on the fact that they weren't going to see a minute, and kind of materialized a bit like that. There's just there maybe because of time served rather than what they're actually going to bring to the actual squad. But I think that's been a feature of the Irish squad over years, is maybe a lack of trust in jersey number 17 to 22 or 23 in the squad. It just hasn't been that, and I don't mean that physical jersey, but the players who kind of fit those roles within the squad. It hasn't been there. I think we've seen a bit more of that from Eileen. I'd like to see more of it again, just in terms of developing the players. Final thing, and it's just the last talking point ahead of the game tomorrow. Only one Irish-based player in the squad. Erin McLaughlin comes back in after her injury woes.
Savannah McCarthy left out. They said due to illness, but she played at the weekends for Shamrock Rovers. Yeah, it's not great, but it's gonna be a thing for the next little while. I think we're going to see a very limited number of home-based players in. And there is one other thing I do need to talk about on this game. If plays tomorrow, Diane Caldwell will win her 100th cap, become the 6th female player to reach the century mark for Ireland. Remember speaking to her before the World Cup, she sort of didn't know whether she'd get to the 100 caps. I think if Vera Powell had stayed on, she probably would have retired off the back of the World Cup. But on course to make that 100 cap tomorrow against Albania.
Yeah, we do keep those statistics on the site as well. With the caveat that they only date from 2005. So we don't have Emma Byrne with her full complement, and there might be a few others missing a couple of caps from that era as well. But if we look at it, that is the accurate, for the most part, from 2005 to now, the number of caps there. Anya O'Gorman, of course, recently retired. Louise Quinn will go 1-1-1 as well. So plenty of opportunities there for players. If I just zoom in a little bit there, you'll be able to read it a little bit easier. In terms of what players have done. So a couple of familiar names in there as well that will feature tomorrow night. Katie McCabe getting close to that 100 as well, and she's still a young woman.
Yeah, Katie will get that. Katie will get that 100. I'd say Katie will get that 100 by 2025. I'd suspect.
Yeah, and probably smash Anya's record as well. It's Emma Byrne's
Emma Byrne's record. Emma Byrne's the record cap. Yeah.
So obviously that figure just from 2005 to now. We will continue to backdate that as we grow the site, but at the moment that's all that's there. Tomorrow night predictions, you think 5 or 6-0?
Yeah, I'd say 5 or 6-0 Ireland.
Yeah, I'd hope so. Anything less than that is a discussion against a team at the caliber of Albania. Listen, that's it. We'll see you tomorrow night in the Tallaght Stadium. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a good game and another good opportunity for Ireland to show what they can do. We'll be back next week with another show. We'll chat to you then.